Hello there, it is that time of year again. I am still speaking to you from my apartment, but we are back to go over our most significant new features for the release of Marvelous Designer 11. We will be taking a look at our new user interface, the addition of partial solidify, and our retopology improvements with elements from a scene our designers created using Marvelous Designer 11. Beginning now.
Going over to the left side of the screen, we now have the General and Store tabs. The Store tab is where you can shop garments available on the Marvelous Designer store inside of the application. When you see something you want to purchase, you can select the plus icon and then log in for website purchases using your user ID. For enterprise users, make sure you use your company ID to make any purchases in the Marvelous Designer store tab. Going back to the General tab, here is where we will be working to make cloth items ourselves in Marvelous Designer 11 and where we have all of our main windows. Previously, we could only have 2 workspace windows open. Now we can have up to 4 workspace windows open at one time by using the Mode drop-down tab. There are now more window arrangement options in the bottom right-hand corner where the Refresh Windows button is. I'm going to go ahead and reset my windows, going back to the basic settings that we are all familiar with. With these increased Windows options, we can now pop them out using the duplicate icon in the top right-hand corner of each respective window, which lets you take those popped out windows and move them over to other screens if you have multiple screens, or even change their location inside of Marvelous Designer 11. As mentioned earlier, you can now select your mode in the drop-down menu on any of the windows, allowing you to use multiple modes simultaneously. If more than one 3D window is open, you can also have different tools selected and active per window at the same time. As you can see here, I have retopology selected in one window and the segment sewing tool selected in the other. And you can see the tool change as I go to each window. The 2D pattern window is linked to whichever 3D window was active last, so that you can continue to use that same tool. As you can see here, I have the segment sewing tool selected in the 3D window, and if I go over to my 2D window, I can then continue to use the segment sewing tool. The outer windows can be changed or grouped as you like, and as before, you can hide your side windows with the arrow icon to give you more working space if necessary. Selecting the X in the top right corners of the side windows allows you to close the windows, but remember to reset your interface to bring them back. While each side window can be dragged or grouped, just remember that there will only be one 2D window, so you can toggle which window will house that mode, and they will swap. Moving on to the tools now, you can see that they are grouped as they were in Marvelous Designer 10, and now you can use this little dashed line when you select the drop-down menu to duplicate a pop-up of that tool and its contents anywhere you want for easier access. You can also move the toolbar by grabbing the control handle on the left side for both the 3D and the 2D pattern windows, moving them to any edge of the window that you want. Lastly, we have moved the animation editor to its own window at the bottom of the application, so selecting this little arrow, I can then open and close the window, as well as we have added some more frame rate options. So that is a quick intro to the new user interface, so let's go ahead and take a look at partial solidify. Before we get started on partial solidify, I did want to show off our 3D designer Michelle's work here on this 1820s to 1829 tuxedo. As you can see, this pattern is relatively complicated. It does have a 2-piece sleeve, which we'll be focusing on in a bit. It has the pleated trousers. This is a tuxedo with the kick pleat in the back and a vest with a cravat. Michelle also used a trick here to create a thickness to the material without increasing the simulation thickness, which is to create a lining. You can do this quite easily by right-clicking your pattern pieces and choosing the layer clone over or under options. This allows you to create a thickness of the material without actually having to increase the thickness itself for export. So let's go ahead and we will move on to the shoulder pieces here and use partial solidify. So with partial solidify, you can assign solidify to selected portions of the garment using the select mesh brush tools. You can use any of the select mesh tools, the brush, lasso, or box, by left clicking and selecting the area of the pattern that you want to solidify. You can do this in either the 2D or the 3D windows. This sleeve pattern here has pressure to keep the sleeve cap in its shape. We can use partial solidify to keep the pattern while then being able to remove the pressure and turn that off later for more shaping and wrinkle creation if we want to move his elbows. In short, I want to keep the wrinkles on the top where the sleeve cap is, but also allow movement on the elbow to create more wrinkles later. So I will select both layers of this pattern. So this one is lined, or it is just kind of double-sided. So we're going to select both the top and lower layers, including a bit of the underarm with my preferred method. Here I'm using the brush tool. After painting your selection, right-click and choose Solidify. Once Solidify is applied to that part of the pattern, you can then see the highlighted color changes indicating that that area is now solidified. I'm going to go ahead and remove the pressure from the sleeve and simulate it. Now it will maintain its shape after I turn off the pressure. You can also delete Solidify by selecting that section with the selection tool and just pressing delete. Let's go ahead and play with another piece. Here we have another one of the assets that will be in the scene. This is the foreground curtain. This curtain is currently half made. As you can see here, it's not even gathered, but the way I've laid it out is a great example of how to utilize the Solidify tool. So let's go ahead and pop out that select mesh tool. I'm just going to put it on the side here and zoom in on those little circles. So where those circles are is where I'm going to be putting some relatively intricate kind of embroidery, and I just want to solidify just those areas. I've placed the circles there just so you can see. So let's go ahead. And I'm going to solidify all the areas with embroidery. You can see one there. I'm just going to use my preferred select mesh tool, selecting the center circle, just double checking. I can do it in the 3D window or the 2D window. And I'm just going to select that whole area just so it won't collapse on itself a little bit later. So right-clicking and just choosing Solidify. And then I'm going to make my size a bit smaller. And I'm just going to solidify the smaller circle areas, just all as one group, holding Shift to select multiple. This lower one here, I'm probably going to remove some of that line where that internal line is, because that will be where elastic is. Again, you can remove it if you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and Control Z, step back. And you can see I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this little guy here, just so it'll pull in. And then selecting Solidify again. And lastly, selecting the embroidery little flowers there. Those, you can see the internal lines. And right-clicking, choosing Solidify. You can see that the color has changed in the 3D window. And I'm going to go ahead and close those tools. And put an elastic value on those internal lines because I am going to have it pull over to the left side. Just reducing the ratio and increasing the strength. Oh yeah, I forgot, I need to freeze just a part of this on the edge just so it will not move to the center and they'll all just move to the left side that I'm trying to fake a tie back with. And then choosing Simulate. And letting that pull over. Oh, looks like I didn't do enough, so I'm going to go ahead and increase the value of the elastic, both the strength and the ratio. Once that's done, I can turn on my curtain tieback, which I do have hidden here, and adjust its location. And then I'm just going to go ahead and finish adjusting it, and then right click and choose Activate, and then freeze. You can already see that the solidified areas are holding up pretty well, which is great. So I am going to start creating that gather at the top of the curtain. So you do want your curtains to be at least 1.5 to 2 times the width. Going ahead and simulating, and it should fly right in. Oh, there it goes. And you can see that with these pieces partially solidified on the curtain, they're holding their shape, which is exactly what I was hoping for. That way my embroidery will look like it's stabilized without having to have multiple layers of fabric there. Once that settles, I'm going to move it back to where it's kind of laying down to make it a little bit more natural. And then I will delete all of the elastic value, so it has a more natural tieback. Simulating again. And then I can start stair-stepping down my particle distance, because this curtain here is currently 20 particle distance, and I will definitely need to clean this up a bit. So I'm going to bring it down to 10. Now that it's in place and I have my areas partially solidified, I can go ahead and finish making this curtain.
Here we have a beautiful dress created by one of our designers, Brandon. It's a very detailed, historic garment with quite a few parts, but for this segment we are going to focus on just the skirt portion of the dress using my personal favorite new feature in Marvelous Designer 11, our retopology improvements. First, I'm going to hide the bow on the back of the dress so that I can see the form of the skirt a bit better, though once I select the Edit Topology tool in the 3D window, the previous topology work Brandon did on the bow will reappear. You can see in the 2D window that I've already filled in topology on a portion of the skirt. I've done this so that we can immediately see the first of our retopology improvements, the topology ghost points. These ghost points appear at the edges of patterns where sewing relationships connect them to existing topology information. Any new points you create can be snapped to these ghost points, making sure that vertices across themes will meet in the same place. The other major addition in our retopology improvements for Marvelous Designer 11 is the Patch Topology tool. The Patch Topology tool allows you to quickly block out rectangular or triangular sections with neatly organized quads. Once you close a rectangle with the Patch Topology tool, you can select any edge and edit the number of divisions to fit your needs. Here, I need 4 vertical rows to roughly match the ghost points to the left of this patch. After everything appears to be correct, click Create to finish a patch. If between creating patches you close the patch topology pop-up window, as I've done here, you can just deselect and reselect the patch topology tool to bring it back. Now that I have a couple of larger areas blocked out, I'm going to begin snapping the points I've created to the ghost points along the pattern's edge. Once that is finished, I continue along with the Create and Edit Topology tools until I've filled out the entirety of this pair of symmetrical patterns. Here I'd like to highlight a nice detail that, while it isn't directly relevant to retopology, can be very helpful for improving the look of your garments. Brandon has created strips of facing along the outer edges of his patterns, given them a bit of additional collision thickness, and folded them underneath to create the rounded edges you would see in a finished piece of physical clothing in the real world. I'm going to block out the larger quads along the facing first. Then I am using the Control plus Shift hotkey to automatically add full rows of edges so that the facing can have some dimension. And finishing off the strip by connecting the two sections. On the bottom layer of the skirt, I'm using a method with the patch tool that helps save a great deal of time. Because I already have reference points at the bottom of these pattern pieces, I can create a patch with 14 horizontal rows and only one vertical row. Then I snap all the points at the bottom of the patch I've created to the ghost points at the bottom of the pattern. This allows me to easily draw clean rows of edges using the Control and Shift hotkey until I've reached the top, doing my best to keep the quads square along the way. Then I repeat the same steps for the back pattern using the Create Topology tool and the Control and Shift hotkey. I drew these rows as closely as I could to the ghost points from the previous pattern, but I still need to snap them into place. Following that, I'll just do some general cleanup and finish drawing topology on the last piece of facing. And having finished that, the entire garment has been covered. Now it's time to check my work. In the 3D view, I can change my view mode to wireframe on surface. Then, hovering over the topology I've drawn in the 2D window, I right-click with my mouse and select Remesh All Replace. Now that the original mesh has been completely replaced, I can clearly see the results, and I'm rolling around the mesh looking for any errors or points that don't match up. And right here I see what looks like a gap. It absolutely is, so I'm going to undo the retopology. and then pop that point into place using the Edit Topology tool in the 3D window. After correcting that mistake, I once again right-click to select Remesh All Replace, and investigate the rest of the skirt for any gaps. Fairly quickly I spot an edge with multiple gaps, so something is wrong here. I thought I was pretty careful, but when I undo the retopology replacement, these edges and faces clearly do not line up across the seam. Moving back to the 2D space, I can see that something is wrong here as well. The ghost points don't line up on the right side of this symmetrical pattern pair, but they do line up on the pattern to the left. When something like this happens, the first place to look is at the sewing relationships. So I take a look at them with the Edit Sewing tool and realize that some sewing relationships on the back patterns have been nudged around and are no longer symmetrical. I fix the mismatch and double check to make sure that all sewing relationships on symmetrical patterns are now symmetrical. The points still won't align in the 3D window, however, because the garment must be simulated in order to update the placement of the sewing relationships here. So I simulate the garment and wait for a few moments. After I stop the simulation, I take another look with the Edit Retopology tool. Most of the previously misaligned points now match exactly. There are just two that need to be popped back into place, so I snap them to the ghost points they should match with, and I am nearly done. After selecting Remesh All Replace one last time, all vertices along seams are properly set up for welding, and this dress is finally ready for export. If you've made it to the end of the video here, thank you for spending your valuable time with us. Keep an eye out for the updates we will be releasing over the next several months, and please give us your feedback at the link in the video description. Have a good night, and enjoy the rest of your year. Oh.